G'day legends, I hope that you're doing well, and today might be a short video. Now today's actually my birthday, and although I'm not having much of a celebration because tonight I have a colonoscopy and the preparation for that is terrible. So this is because I'm still having major problems with my digestive system since my 13 months of chemotherapy. So today is literally a shit birthday. Now, we'll jump to the maps, but Deep State has not updated for today, so it's very difficult to show any movement. I don't know why these other maps don't do this, because Deep State has where you can just go through day to day today and watch movement to and from. None of the other maps really can actually do that at least well. So I don't know why they wouldn't do that, but it is going to be difficult to show you. But we can say that Bakhmut is holding, and my contact there is saying that counterattacks are limiting Russia's advance. My question is, though, at what cost? Although a contact is telling me also that Wagner Group are still having problems with their artillery barrels and getting ammunition. And a lot of what's being released from Prigozhin is purely just propaganda to get more support for Wagner Group and the Russian side. But the artillery barrels is apparently a huge issue. Now, interestingly as well, Rybar have released a map showing what could be the counterattacks from Ukraine to cut off where we've seen Russia gain territory to the west from north and south of Bakhmut. So this is where, people have been saying, and we're saying as well, this sort of surrounding or isolation of Bakhmut. But they're also saying that these blue could be the counterattacks from Ukraine and these brigades to cut these areas off. And there has been other YouTubers say that there could be major counterattacks, and this could be a bit of a Trojan horse almost for Russia to capture them here. Now, what do I think? I think this is somewhat unlikely. I think this area is just an area where there's so many casualties are being inflicted on the Russian side that Ukraine will stay there as long as possible, as well as massive tactical and symbolic regions as well. But it's very interesting to see from a very pro-Russian standpoint, at least where these maps come from, talking about these potential counteroffensives. These maps don't really show if there's been much movement, but if we compare it to the live UA, there's no massive significant difference. So I guess the Russian map is showing a bit more on the western side, but again, hopefully I'll get an update to you tomorrow and have a look. Let's just double check while we're here. If Deep State, no, still the 9th. Normally I update these at about 10 o'clock in the morning. My time is at 3 a.m. Ukraine time, but it hasn't been. And we'll look on the ISW map. Things are looking very similar, although it has shown that Russia is taking complete control up to the Bakhmutka River, which runs north-south through Bakhmut, which was a bit of a natural split between the forces. As well as we know, there's massive ongoing fighter in Avdiivka, and as well still attacks on Vuhledar, with a lot of Russian failed offensives in this region. Now, yesterday there was another wave of missile strikes across Ukraine, and according to the Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's armed forces, Valery Zaluzhny, Russia launched 81 missiles, 8 Iranian-made Shahed drones on March the 9th. He reports that Ukraine's air defense downed 34 missiles and 4 of the drones. Among these include the modern Kinzhal ballistic missiles. Now, this is a hypersonic Russian missile, which Ukraine does not possess the technology to counter, and most would agree the West does not also have this ability. Putin has regularly touted that NATO has no answer to these, and it's known that, at least for open source, there is no real counter for hypersonics, and that's why there's been this race between America, China, and Russia, particularly in developing these hypersonics. But Russia has shown that they do have this technology, but in what numbers, we don't know. Most would say in a very limited capacity. But it said that the attack hit residential buildings and critical infrastructure across Ukraine on Thursday, leaving tens of thousands without power again, although the power is starting to come back online. Now, Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Union, has once again charged that targeting of civilians and energy grid is a war crime. Now, targeting of civilians is absolutely a war crime, no doubt, no ifs, no buts. But what I wanted to explore is the question of attacking infrastructure, such as energy grid. Is that a war crime? Now, I'm not going to tell you whether it is or isn't, but I'll present to you what the Department of Defense manual says and let you make up your own minds. Now, again, I'm not endorsing or supporting anything. As you know, I condemn any violence, and I will never deny Russia has committed war crimes during this invasion. But this is important. And why is it important? Well, the Duke University's law file puts it, let's readily acknowledge Russia's horrifying criminality in this war. But let's also step back, analyse specifics, as it is important that we understand exactly how the laws of armed conflict, LOAC, applies in this instance. Why? While we must support Ukraine in this profoundly unjust war waged against them, we also need to be wary of seeming to establish new legal interpretations and precedents that might handicap the US and allied forces in a future conflict against other shamefully malevolent yet powerful adversary. Now, this basically is saying that the US and the West has directly targeted infrastructure before, and ruling this out could handicap us in a war in the future by not being able to do it. Now, for this, we'll use the Department of Defense Law of War Manual. Now, what is a military objective? Now, in the DoD 5/6/3, it states military objectives, insofar as objects are concerned, include any object which by its nature, location, purpose, or use makes an effective contribution to military action, of whose total or partial destruction, capture, or neutralization in the circumstances ruling at the time offers a definite military advantage. Now, can a civil-owned and operated electrical system qualify as a military objective? Now, 5/6/8/5 states, electric power stations are generally recognised to be one of sufficient importance to a state's capacity to meet its wartime needs of communication, transport, and industry, so as usually to qualify as a military objectives during armed conflicts. Now, also, do modern militaries really need electricity from the civilian grid? The RAND Corporation, who is an American non-profit global policy think tank, says the US Department of Defense increasingly relies on electric power to accomplish critical missions. As a result, ensuring that forces and facilities have access to a reliable supply of electric power is critical for mission assurance. However, the DoD does not directly manage its supply power. Most of the electricity consumed by military installations in the continental United States comes from the commercial grid, a system that is largely outside of the DoD control and is increasingly vulnerable to both natural hazards and deliberate attacks. Now, for example, experts say that Starlink, which is a privately owned system that provides internet service and is obviously dependent upon electrical power, has become an essential tool for the Ukrainian military to coordinate across thousands of kilometers of combat theatre. In analysing the legitimacy of attacking the electrical system that has both civilian and military uses. Now, this is DoD Manual 5/6/1/2. Sometimes dual use is used to describe objects that are used by both the armed forces and civilian population, such as power stations or communication facilities. However, from the legal perspective, such objects are either military objectives or they are not, and there is no intermediate legal category. Now, my reading to this is if you can show military advantage to a civilian-owned thing such as the power or the communications, that becomes a military target. But this is up to you to decide. Russia and pro-Russians have often claimed the attacks on the Kerch Bridge was a war crime, a bridge connecting Crimea with Russia. Now, James Dunlap Jr., who is a former deputy judge, advocate general for the United States Air Force, who's in the Duke of Law faculty with professors Michael Schmidt and Marko Malevnik, they have examined it in the context of the October 8th attack, allegedly by Ukrainians, on the Kerch Strait Bridge that connects Russia with the Crimean Peninsula. Now, Professors Schmidt and Malevnik, with formidable laws of armed conflict expertise, conclude, as do I, that notwithstanding its civilian uses, the bridge is properly categorized as a military objective. Indeed, in my view, there is no real question that the bridge is such an extremely important logistics link for the Russian military that it easily meets the legal definition of a military objective. Professor Schmidt and Milanovic also readily acknowledge the attack could have also been expected to affect the supply of civilian population and disrupt civilian activities ranging from personal travel to commercial activities. So this is an example on, I guess, the other side where people are pointing fingers of what is civil infrastructure, what is military. And of course, the line gets a little bit blurry as it was stated that it can either be one or the other. The dual use is where it gets very difficult. But I think it's important someone like the president of the EU to use this sort of language needs to be dead on. Now, I could be completely wrong and she may be dead on. She's much smarter than me, much more access to intelligence, but it is a very big statement. So my question is, what do you think of these attacks that are against civilian infrastructure? Are these legitimate targets in a modern environment? There is so much more in this around the laws of armed conflict, countries' obligations to separate military targets from civilian areas, and also targeting of areas and how it could affect civilians. So I'll link the Department of Defense Law of War manual below. So look, I hope you're having a great day. Look after yourself, and hopefully I'll speak to you tomorrow with a better map update. Okay, thank you very much. Bye-bye.